Mr. Kreiner, how are you doing this morning?
Doing great.
And it's
No,
it's
it's just about
Halloween, so
November. Yeah,
yeah,
just about
it's
November, and we're competing Saturday, so we're stoked. Girls are excited. We're prepared, so it doesn't get much better than the rest of the season.
yeah, you're gonna hop in a bus tonight, so you won't probably get to go trick or treating. So
No,
where are you headed this weekend?
we head up to UW Stevens Point. It's about a 4.5 hour drive, so it's a good little trek up. We got a big old charter bus, and getting the team together and going to see how we compete and fight.
Very nice. So you're doing a great job at Wartburg. I mean, it's just I see the stuff all the time online, getting some big recruits. But let's talk about D3 just a little bit. There's obviously some misconceptions that, I hear all the time. What's good about D3?
Yeah, and I mean, with myself being a D3 athlete, that I get what what can happen as a D3 athlete? Is it easy? Absolutely not. But if you want to truly develop into the best man or the best woman, I believe D3 is the best place for that because you're gonna have to, manage your time between school, wrestling, maybe a job, and being able to do that, you grow real quick. I mean, in our society right now, it's, everything should be free, everything should be easy, and you shouldn't suffer. Like that's the exact opposite. Just trying to help our women, find that place where it's okay to struggle. You're gonna struggle in life, you're gonna have hard times, and it's kind of how you perceive it. How you react to it. Like, hey, I have a challenge in front of me, and I'm gonna go knock it down, instead of, hey, I'm gonna feel bad for myself because other people have it better, right? That's not life. So being a D3 athlete, you're gonna be able to have really good relationships with your professors. I think that's the best thing about Wartburg is I love being on campus, and I think our girls and value that because you can't walk anywhere on campus without someone saying hi or smiling at you, and that's contagious. And that's the culture here at Wartburg. Obviously we were pretty good at athletics, but I feel like as a whole, our community and our professors and our staff do a really good job of developing for the future. So our women can go out and change lives and help our society get better.
Yeah, and you hear this a lot. Well, D3 I can't get an athletic scholarship. What is the real as far as your final paying, how much mom and dad are writing the check for? How does Wartburg do?
I think we do great. I mean, obviously within our demographic right now, we compete against a lot of D2 and D1, and you'd be really surprised that we come out pretty even, or maybe 1,000 or two over some of these really good D2 programs with an athletic scholarship. Because the reality is there's not a lot of money in women's wrestling right now. It's coming, I think, but also being able to go to school and you're going to be cared for as a student athlete and not just an athlete, I think is something that we do a really good job at Wartburg. And again, our packages come out pretty even because most of the girls we're recruiting, they're pretty intelligent. They have good grades. They respect their families, and they know what they want in life. And I think that's what we look for in recruits is making sure that they they know where they want to be. And our packages, they sometimes we get beat, and sometimes it's a hard conversation like, hey, I think you should probably go to this place because it's going to set you up way better. And there's a lot of times that, like, we get picked over because they want to say they have an athletic scholarship. And I get that it's pretty cool to say, but and as a mentor and a coach and gone through the D3 process, I can honestly say that being valued as a person, and being able to be mentored into a better person, I think is a lot more valued.
Yeah, I know I've told girls plenty of times. It's kind of nice to know your scholarship is not tied to your athletic performance. I think one of the stats that really hit me, and I don't know if it's changing. It might have been a couple of years since I heard this. The number of girls wrestling in college in Iowa, I think we're spoiled because there's so many options. But it's still only like 2.5, 3% of all girls wrestling in high school are going to wrestle in college. But within the first 2 years, 50% of those have stopped for whatever reason, whether that's injury, whether they're at a 2 year school, whether they really didn't know what college wrestling was going to be about. So not having your scholarship tied to that is kind of good to know. Know that I'm still going to get my education. I don't have to leave this school because, whatever happened. So, um,
Yeah, and I think another point on that is, we talk to a lot of girls in the recruiting process, and balance is a word that comes up. It's not a balance of, hey, is wrestling going to be easier and I can do what I want here. It's, hey, can I get a great education and can I compete at a high level? And I think that's something that, not even at a lot of D3s are you going to get that, but at Wartburg you are, because we have such a relationship between our professors and our athletic department. You're not good at every sport on campus, and specifically wrestling that isn't very well widely supported across the country. Where at Wartburg, it's the number one sport on campus. People know who Wartburg wrestlers are, and I think that's something that our athletes get when they come here too. So I think that's something that helps us out too.
yeah, one of the conversations that's happening all over the place, NIL. I'm honestly very worried for wrestling. It's not a revenue sport for most places, so my thought is, and I actually had this conversation just the other day, is D3, the JUCOs, NAI, is that going to be the last amateur athletics? Is that going to be all that's left? And is
I
wrestling going
think,
to survive?
yeah, I mean, I'm a believer. I'm gonna be one of those that find a way. I think that's just wrestlers. We're just gonna find a way to keep it alive, and I think D3 is the safest one. Honestly, I think. Um, because there's not athletic money to it. I don't think there's the revenue share and all those things. And I mean, I heard a comment one time from a D1 coach that's pretty high up. They're probably top 10 team right now in the country, that he believes that there's going to be a scholarship D1 and a non-scholarship D1 division at some point, because there is going to be a big gap between NIL or scholarships. So that was surprising to me, and I think that's even more, people ask me, like, do you want to go to a different place? Do you want to have scholarships? And being around Coach Keller, I think that I've just valued that even more, that you get to have the relationships and you don't ever have to worry about taking a scholarship away, or putting a number on a kid. It's
Yeah,
how, instead it's, man, it's how much can we change these lives? Can we change every life? And I think that's something that NIL has changed, that at every level. Would I love to be able to help our athletes? Absolutely. But I think keeping it the way it used to be as much as possible is going to be able to keep our sport, the way it used to be. They come in and, they wrestle their butt off, and, that's what they focus on, instead of, hey, where can I go and find the most money at?
yeah,
So I think it's coming. I mean, there's definitely been conversations about it. Just there's just not a whole lot of money at D3 colleges. I'm still trying to find that gold mine somewhere, but
yeah.
maybe someday.
Actually, this is another thing I heard a couple of years ago that, of course, like the quarterback's getting $5 million and things like that, but for the average athlete, uh, women female athletes are actually doing better than most of the male athletes because they know how to market themselves. They're online all the time. People see them, brands see them. So there's even for a D3 person, there's opportunities like that. So they might actually do better than the guys at Wartburg. So
Yeah.
um, I don't anymore have a daughter, but I have a daughter. Let's say I have a daughter and we're coming for a visit. What are some of the things that we're going to see at Wartburg? What are you going to do during a college visit?
Yeah, I think it's just, get the full experience. Being a tour, our admission staff is phenomenal. Just making sure they can answer every question possible, and kind of painting that picture of what that investment's going to be over 4 years. Because as a D3 athlete, it is an investment. It may not be the cheapest option, but you're going to get the most return on investment. And um, being able to eat lunch in the cafeteria, I think, is a big thing as well. We have a phenomenal cafeteria, which I can bring it up more later, but we work with a company called Econ Nutrition, and
Yep,
they
I
came
got
and
that on
just
my list.
yeah, they redesigned our whole cafeteria and added a fuel station and all these things that have, not just only helped our athletes, but helped our campus be healthier, and I think that's something to go to show of, how awesome our campus is and how much they care about, the betterment of every student on campus. And then, obviously meeting or looking at our facilities, and anybody that's been in our wellness center, it's one of the best across country, or probably some of probably better than some of the smaller D1s out there, because it's unique where we have two weight rooms, we have a pool, we have an indoor track. So we see a lot of our community members, a lot of our boosters, a lot of our professors that are in there working out. They're in our space working out, and what a better opportunity for our athletes to learn how to network and connect, maybe other than Snapchat, and be able to have a face-to-face conversation and grow and end up with an internship or job. It's happened already multiple times in the past 2 years, and it is possible because people want to hire Wartburg wrestlers. They want to have that mindset in their companies. And with being in Waverly, our town supports Wartburg so much, and I think that's something that's great for us too.
Yeah, you're in a nice little area for wrestling. Waverly, Cedar Falls area. There's a lot of clubs that even I'm guessing a lot of your guys go, or a lot of women can go help out those clubs and maybe make some money that way.
Mhm.
One of the things that I was told is that it's hard to go to Wartburg on a recruiting visit, and you walk into where you keep all of your national championship trophies, and not be totally blown away. The person I was talking to said they've never seen so many national championship trophies in one spot. So what's that? Well, I guess I haven't been up there, so that's a goal of mine is to get up there. But what's this trophy room like?
Yeah, so it's actually a hallway. It's called the Hallway of Champions. So at Wartburg we have, it's also banners because at Wartburg we have 16 men's wrestling titles, which is the most in Division III history. We have 8 women's track titles and one men's track title. So, we walk in and then we get down to the hallway by the Levick Arena, and there's trophy cases, but there's no space in the trophy cases because they're full of championship trophies. And it's not a joke because Coach Keller has 3 national championship trophies in his office. He's run out of space where to put them. And that's what our coaches are doing. I mean, we don't got room, so we're trying to find a way to build another, I guess, a trophy case. But it's something that goes to show you of obviously winning's cool, but to know you have the support and backing to do that, it allows you to do a lot more of that. And I think it's hard in college right now because a lot of colleges are worried about, having kids on campus. They're trying to survive. Where Wartburg, people come to Wartburg because they want to be great. And we're overfilling dorms right now. Because people get that, Wartburg doesn't just support obviously the students, but they're making sure we have every resource possible to make sure we can succeed on the mat or in the gym or whatever it may be. So it's contagious, but we in our recruiting process that we're pretty adamant that, like, hey, at Wartburg, there is a high expectation of excellence. You're going to be held at a standard that you're not going to be held at anywhere else. Is that something that you want to be held at? Because not every person actually truly wants to reach their full potential or do what's needed to reach their full potential. So trying to narrow that down, helps. Hey, like, I tell our girls, like, hey, we're competing in everything we do. If you got to trip someone on the way to class to beat them, like, you got to do it. Like, if you're, competing on a test, like, that's life, is trying to compete in everything we do.
So when you're on these recruiting calls, recruiting visits, they're looking for their fit, but you're also looking for the best fit for your team. What are some of the things that you actually look for that maybe people don't realize that you're noticing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is how they treat people. How do they treat their parents? More importantly, how do they treat their teammates? Or they winning a match and then darting off to go grab a pretzel, or are they staying around because their teammates up next and they're supporting them? Or they lose a match and how is their reaction? Are they being attentive to the criticism that their coach is giving or their parents giving? Because if they're like that, they're darting off or not respectful. If they're not doing it to them, like, they're not going to respect us, and then we're not able to fulfill our goal of helping every one of our women develop into the woman they want to be. It's really hard to do. So that's a big thing. A big question that we ask in our recruiting process that helps narrow down our recruits is, what do you like to do outside of wrestling? You know, because a lot of times wrestlers, we're probably not good at many other sports, so we have to be really good at wrestling, and when wrestling goes wrong, if we get hurt, what are we going to rely back on? Is it my faith? Is it my friends? Is it fishing? Is it walking? Whatever it may be that we talk a lot in our girls that like we have to have that out to wrestling, because the more we can have a hobby, the more we can, you know, dive into our faith, the better we're actually going to be in wrestling because we're not just going to be solely focused on wrestling. So when something goes wrong, it's not like banging my dart off. Hey, I can stay here because I have XYZ to hold me to my vision and my path. So that's a big thing. And another big thing that, society is, we lack people that smile, we trick our girls into smiling, right away. The more you can fake it to smile, the more it becomes what you do. It's contagious. If we got five people coming in because they just failed the test, like it's gonna be contagious. So making sure our girls can at least fake it. That's half of life is just faking it and to until you feel good. So, those are the big three things to make sure we can have fun while we wrestle. Yeah, I think those are. I mean, obviously wrestling's a big part of it, but we want to make sure we have those other three things that make our development a lot easier and possible.
Yeah, I've been around a couple starting new programs at different levels, NAIA, and D3. First year, always tough, a lot of growing pains because you're relying on a mostly freshman group for your leadership. You're now in year three of competition. You had a year of recruiting. What does it look like now from year one? What have you established here?
I feel like you can finally breathe. To be honest, that the big thing with coming over from the men's side is the expectation of what it means to be a Wartburg wrestler, and being year one and having freshmen and maybe a few sophomores that transferred in, it's really hard because, you got to focus on the little wins, you got to focus on making sure our girls understand that each one of them have a role, whether that's a starter, or that's a promoter, or that's a good partner or, making sure that, we can nail every aspect of our life, whether that be school as well that you know and I think just figuring things out. I was in a unique situation where I had really great mentors that allowed me to graduate in May and get hired in June to be a head wrestling coach. I think that's something that's very rare, and being able to have that recruiting year allowed me to make that jump and you know have girls buy into our vision right away because we know what we're doing. That year three, it's something that we took a big leap of faith in, as we invested in a company called Athletes Mentor. Cody Alish and his wife Teresa. Cody's actually a Wartburg alum, and they run a company called Athletes Mentor that focuses on mentorship and leadership. That we have broken up our team into leadership teams, and they've done a great job of nailing down non-negotiables. What do they want our team goals to be? What do they want our team culture to be? Right. I mean, I have a vision, but I'm not living it. I'm not breathing it. I'm not seeing what they're doing every day. So that's a big thing that we talk as well is when I'm out in my recruiting, what do you guys want me to talk about of what our program represents? Obviously, I want it to be great, but what is our three pillars? That's a big thing that we've been talking about that they're developing right now that has helped our team grow tremendously. Is because now we do have an upperclassman, and it's time to set that expectation for what it means to be a Wartburg women's wrestler. And I think they're in a fun time um, to to, to do it themselves. To define it. And it's a hard thing to do. But being able to dig deep and think about their purpose allows all these things to come to fruition.
Nice. And so that numbers this year, as compared, where are you sitting at with numbers and what are some of the high expectations you have and maybe who are some of the standouts that you're really looking to see place high this year that take Wartburg to that next level?
Yeah, we are at 40, 42 this year in 3 years.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we have a great roster, and I couldn't tell you one girl that I don't love or that doesn't just embrace every aspect of Wartburg women's wrestling. And that's hard to do, and that's in our selective recruiting process that we nail things down and do a great job. So every one of our girls come in and, they're like each other, they understand the expectations. So, expectations at Wartburg, are always the same. We don't focus on controllables, we focus on, or non-controllables, we focus on controllables of, our attitude, our effort. And that's every day. If we can do these things every day, come in ready to go, have a smile on our face, and embrace the challenge ahead, that we can get 1% better, to make sure that we're in the best possible place when we go to compete, or when we're wrestling for national championship, or just maybe even a spar drill. That we're it's just everything matters.
Yeah.
Athletes
So
wise, athletes wise, I mean, it's just hard to say because we have a great group of freshmen. I think we brought in 4 or 5 top 30 girls in the country. So I mean, our freshmen are impressing us. I think the level of wrestling just keeps getting better and better. We found that out at the national tournament last year. We wrestled really well and just still didn't. We didn't get anyone on the podium, but we wrestled really well. So we had to analyze and look back, and it was really just a level of wrestling. We can't just keep getting better every day. We got to find a way to, what are these high school girls doing in their trends? Is it more guts? Is it more um, XYZ? That we've done a really good job to make sure we can get to that level of competition. I mean, we have 7 returning national qualifiers. Anaya Kelly, she's a South Carolina girl. Riwa Chababo, she's one of our seniors. She's from Texas. May Prado, she's from Georgia. And then I have a Wisconsin girl, Kylie Rule. She was a freshman All American. And then I think we had 3 freshman national qualifiers last year with Ellie Paulette. She's from Missouri. And then Jasmine Lutke from Ottumwa, which I'm sure you guys all know that name pretty well. And
yep,
then
yep.
Carissa Hersom, she's from Southeast Polk. She had wrestled maybe 1 year freestyle, and we developed her in 1 year to be a national qualifier. So that was a pretty unique story. So we're just excited that this collective group is ready to fight and have fun.
Yeah, the coaching tree out of Wartburg, pretty impressive. You like a Nick Mitchell, that's one of the guys I talk to every once in a while, and just an amazing guy. But you hear these same things. They're the things coming out of Wartburg. You're a great coach. Well, who are the coaches that inspired you and put you on this path?
Yeah, I think first most my father. I've been on a wrestling mat since I could, I don't know, breathe. I mean, I feel like my dad was, I remember being in Melcher, Dallas, and on the wrestling mat while my dad coached. And, it just grew from there, where I had great high school coaches, Dallas O'Brien, at Southeast Warren. He was pretty old school, so it got me a little bit different feel from there. And then I had one of the best technicians, probably in my belief, is Chad Tunick at High Altitude Wrestling Club. I was fortunate enough to be around a great group that he had around my years of high school. Zane Mulder being one of them. We used to be training partners, and there were just so many good guys around that time that allowed me to develop into really the coach who I am today. The way I teach, the way I talk, all those things are I give about every credit to him. Being able to have a mentor like him. He's kind of crazy some days, but I'd die for that guy. We've had a many car rides, and just being able to mentor me and make sure I'm the best coach possible. And then obviously Wartburg. The main reason why I chose Wartburg was Coach Keller and Coach Ortner at the time. That this dude knows how to win. You know he knows how to develop. Mitchell, Reedy. I mean, dude, I mean, anybody you can think of probably came from Wartburg at one point. And, coaching was important to me at that time too. And that was one of the things we talked about in the recruiting process is, obviously I want to be a great wrestler, but I want to change lives after I wrestle. And, it was a slam dunk to come to Wartburg and be able to put myself in the best position for that. And, I think that's, again, probably one of the things that set me apart, to be able to jump right into coaching after school and be able to, I mean, in my opinion, kind of knock it out of the park and be able to, kind of set a foundation for what Wartburg women's wrestling is.
You said a lot of really great things there and some amazing coaches. And I know some of those coaches, and yeah, it's just a amazing group that comes out of there, and you guys do an amazing job. Uh, Legacy, one of the things that I've been talking a lot about. Um, as we get old, as older coaches, the legacy we're leaving, not necessarily to prop us up, but what are you hoping that that your athletes take with you beyond the mat?
I think it's just that they can go out and keep doing what they are doing and developing right now into the world, whether that's, as a surgeon or as a physical therapist or, as a teacher, that, that love and that toughness that I instilled into them, they can carry that for the rest of their life. Legacy goes beyond, awards. I kind of, my heart got hit pretty hard when I saw Mitchell's post about his bin of trophies. As a
Yep.
young coach or as a young athlete, that's what you dream about is those accolades. And, kind of reading those things is like, man, what is my legacy? So, I mean, I've thought about that a lot in the last couple weeks since Mitchell stepped down. And, I think just the lasting impact, that any one of these girls can call me anytime and I'll have their back, is something that I think that they'll value for the rest of their life.
Yeah. That's that post that of Mitchell's. Yeah, that was a tough one to read as a coach, especially someone like myself. I'm getting in that last little bit of years of coaching. My body's kind of starting to fail, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this. But
Mhm.
we can't do it alone. Coaching staffs are super important. Who are some of your coaches, and what do you look for when you're hiring those assistant coaches? I know you don't get to have a staff of 20 at a small school, but what are you looking for?
Yeah, I think my staff, just first off, I'm really, really lucky to, have Coach Gunnar Wolfensberger. Is a local Iowa guy, wrestled at University of Iowa or Northern Iowa, and wasn't one of my, go-to guys, one of my personal coaches going through Wartburg. So, when I was looking for a coach, is like, dude, like this guy gets me. We were always on the same page of what I needed as an athlete, what I needed from a coach, and it was a no-brainer. Last year was kind of a test year almost to see if like, hey, do you want to go on a coaching? Because he's a guy that he loves coaching, but he also doesn't want to be like the starlight. He just wants to be the backseat guy and be able to change lives without any recognition. And you know, it's me that's got to pump him up because he is the man. When he speaks, you better be listening because he has a lot of wisdom. And then Coach Sammy Lusk, that's kind of a crazy story. Like, I mean, I've just met her kind of from Wartburg Team Camp. She came up with Ankeny one year, and we hit it off pretty good there. Of just being able to watch her coach and how passionate she is for, obviously putting her girls in the best position to, to be successful, but also, the way that she was there for them afterwards, the way she talked to them, it was a big thing for me. And then connected again at Fargo. And, after Fargo, she gave me a call and was like, hey, is there any positions open at Wartburg? I'm like, there's not, but, I can go to administration and find a way. That's Wartburg. We're gonna find a way to do anything possible. And was able to find another assistant position for her. And oh my gosh, man, I'm so blessed to have her a part of our staff. Like she has just knocked it out of the park of everything. She's willing to learn. She's willing to do more. She's willing to communicate. In a coach and looking for a coach is having assistant coaches, it's important, but you also have to make sure they communicate when problems arise or issues come up. That man, she is awesome in that communication. So if there's a red flag that comes up, man, she's calling me instantly. Whether it's at 10 o'clock or 6 a.m. in the morning, like she gets it. She gets it. With having experience at Grandview and understand the Wartburg coaches or the Wartburg connection there. That's what it was expected. To be able to get your athletes and get your program and your family all on one page. It requires communication across all areas. And but again, she's knocked it out of the park for us in the last, I don't know how long she's even been here. It's maybe 6 weeks, 7 weeks. um, Team bonding, motivational stuff. I've just been so impressed with her. So, and then obviously she's full time at Econ, so she's kind of a bonus for us that she helps a lot with our Econ athletes to just to make sure that we understand the value of food and it can be a positive thing. And fueling your body with food and water actually makes school wrestling, everything better. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be a suffer. And she's, as a male, it's sometimes hard to talk athletes into maybe taking their time getting down to weight, or hey, what about going up a weight? Well, coach, I've never wrestled that way, so I'm not big enough. And having a female coach that had to do it herself. Her body matured at some point in her career, and she had to make the decision. And being one of the best decisions she's made has allowed her body to grow and be fueled every day, has allowed our athletes to buy into everything we say. So having that has definitely been a big help. But also being a Wartburg, something that when I started this program back in 22, that I always had as a Wartburg athlete is our men's staff has like 15 coaches. That I think is pretty special. When you graduate Wartburg, you may graduate, but you don't really ever leave, because we have so many connections in town, and they understand what they got out of the program and out of the family, and everything that Coach Keller preaches, that they want to stay back and help, and that's something that I hope that our women, choose to do. A lot of them are really, really smart and have a really, you know, future ahead of them that they don't have time for that. But here and there, I think we're going to be able to build that staff. And having Coach Keller, Coach Kittleson, Coach Alarts, CT is what we call him. There's a lot of coaches that pop in our practice or help. With hey, we need some Greco action, we'll pull in Coach Kittleson, or some high thigh stuff. We'll pull in Coach Keller. So having everybody on board on both sides of the staff that understand the best for our athletes, and know what it takes to win too, is definitely helps and allows our girls to believe and buy into everything we do.
Yeah. You've mentioned a lot of things throughout this time. You've mentioned Eakin, and Eakin, I actually Joey's coming to Sunday to come talk to my kids and some surrounding schools I invited also. So, the value of nutrition, because we can't do this stuff all alone, and those coaches that try to go out and do everything, having Eakin manage your weight management, you have people coming in. Well, I'm sorry, what was the company again that's doing your mindset leadership stuff?
Yep, athletes mentor.
Athletes mentor, that end of it helps you focus on other things also. The idea that you're creating this team to help each one of these athletes get better, it's really an important thing. And I've seen so many coaches not just so stuck in the ways of, well, this is how we did it, this is how I'm going to do it. I don't need an Ekin to come in. I know how to manage weight. I don't need mindset training because I'm a great coach, those types of things. So recognizing the idea of building that team is a phenomenal thing. One of the things that I think is super important, because I am gone a lot, I do all kinds of things in wrestling. Um, your wife, uh, got to thank her for everything that she does and allows and understands. You were telling me before we started a little story about maybe how that all came about. What's your meeting story with your wife?
Yeah, so my wife, Sarah, she comes from a big wrestling family, the Walker family out of Martinsville, St. Mary's. Then I wrestled with Rob and Dave. One was a three-timer and one was a one-timer, and end up wrestling at the Air Force Academy. And great mentors for me. They weren't the nicest, but they made sure I was really good at wrestling. At camps and at practice that. I wanted. My dad always told me, like, if you had a girlfriend, you better make sure she supports everything you do. And I just basically looked him up or asked him one day, like, you got a sister? Like, I know she's got to get wrestling, because I think she was a wrestling manager at the time. And yeah, long story short, she blew me off for a little bit, but I just stayed consistent because that's what wrestlers do. And the rest is history. And having that support through Wartburg too. So she followed me to Wartburg, and she was the head manager at Wartburg under Coach Keller. And um, it makes a big difference, to make sure that whether it's meals prepped at night or just making sure she stays in my head when maybe things don't go my way, whether it's win a match or I'm injured or whatever. That she's always had my back through the highs and lows. And now we have two beautiful children, a little boy and a little girl. So yeah, I can't thank her enough. I don't know how she does it, but she does.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely want to make sure we included her. Um, I try to split the podcast up a little bit. We talk about wrestling for a while. Not all some of these questions will involve wrestling, but I like to get to know the person just a little bit better, have a little bit more fun with some questions. The practice playlist. Do you get any chance to touch that practice playlist, or the girls like, no, not a chance. Your music is
Yeah,
not being played here.
yeah, we definitely have that, and I put my foot down this year, and I sent out a couple of surveys so they could pick three different. They put in the music they wanted, and then I had my manager make three playlists of like rock, country, and then like their crappy hip hop, rap, whatever you want to call it. So we play one of those three playlists every day, so then I can have somewhat of control or delete some of the not good music. So yeah, I was smart with that because I'm a country and kind of rock and slow kind of hip hop music guy. So that hard stuff gets hard to listen to sometimes.
Yeah, I'm from the late 80s, so my hairband stuff, I get mocked quite a bit. So it's pretty rare if I get my playlist on, but yeah, I try. Uh, Food, huge important thing with wrestlers. I had a guilty pleasure. I love ice cream, but is there one of those foods that you're like, man, I gotta have this. I don't care if it's not the right thing, but this is my guilty pleasure food.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about every wrestler's ice cream. You know, I don't know if there was a night in my wrestling career that I didn't have ice cream. You know, I'd suffer a little bit and have less for dinner just so I could have a couple scoops of ice cream. You know, and Coach Keller didn't like it, but I had him tricked that I was getting calcium and protein out of it. So I had my body tricked that was good for me.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, we go back to you guys are using Ekin now and the way nutrition was being a late 80s, early 90s wrestler, we did some crazy things. My coach is Brent Hagan, Britt, Iowa guy, Northern Iowa guy. We would have morning runs and morning practices, and we would have instead of milk with cereal, we'd have ice cream with cereal. And so I grew up thinking that this was the way to do it. And it is,
Yeah,
honestly. If you've ever had ice cream and cereal, it's a great combination.
I have
Uh,
not.
Waverly, you've been around Waverly quite a while. If I come up and visit, where's the place to go out and eat at Waverly?
Yeah, it's hard. We got a really good Mexican in town, El Sol. We eat there quite a bit, and um, we're honestly I'm a big fan of Joe's Wings. Joe's Nighthawk. He's got some really good wings that we'll go and grab. But honestly, there's so many places in Waverly that are good to eat, and also having Cedar Falls close that you can find anything that you want in town. So yeah, I mean you just pick whatever you want to eat, and there's going to be something in town.
You know, uh, Vacations. I know most of my vacations revolve around a wrestling meet somehow. Um, you're still young, but is there a bucket list place that you want to go? Maybe take your wife.
Take my wife along. She's not a big fan of the mountains, but I like to get out of society and turn my phone off and just enjoy, the natural beauty. But my wife's a big beach fan, so we end up going to the beach instead. So I'm hoping we can go get out this year and go to the mountains or, just get away from cellular service a little bit. So yeah, that'd be mine.
Gotcha. Favorite wrestling shoe of all time?
I don't know. I'm honestly a big fan of these new inflicts. I got the black and white ones, and before then, I would say like the old aggressor ones, or Rulons were probably the most comfortable. But these new inflict fours are a really really good fit, and they're comfortable.
Yeah, I just got a pair of Inflix, first pair of Nikes that I've ever had, and it's amazing how they come pre-broke in.
They
Yeah,
do.
it's like wow, this is a nice shoe. Um, just a few questions left. Wrestling has taught me to blank. You didn't know you were going to take a test today, but here's your question. Wrestling has taught me to.
I think wrestling has just taught me to find a way in anything I do. I think being around as much wrestling as I do, I have a high standard for myself. So that, when a challenge comes, in wrestling, you get taken down, you got to find a way to put your foot back in the line and go do it. And I think that's helped me be a better father, be a better husband, and honestly, just be a better mentor to challenge our athletes every day that, we're in this challenge, we're in this injury, we're in this hard class or, this hard test coming up for a reason. It's how you perceive it and how you're going to challenge yourself to do the best you possibly can.
Very good. So Wrestle Like a Girl, not the organization, not all that, but just the term Wrestle Like a Girl. What does that mean to you? And then what do you think it means to Wartburg women's wrestling?
Kind of joke to some of our girls sometimes, wrestling like a girl, is my job. I hope someday I do a really good job of developing one of our women into a better leader than I am, and she takes my job. Honestly, like that's what I hope, that I can make that big of an impact, that our girls can, develop and be a great leader, and, run an awesome wrestling program. Obviously I like my job, but being able to have another female in here that gets Wartburg wrestling is going to be huge down the road. For Wartburg women's wrestling, I think it's just embodying that, you know, just because you're a female, it doesn't mean you can't be the best possible person. I'd go tell you that some of our women are, meaner or, tougher than some of our men. It's just they get it. I think that's because we have some of the best women in the country on our team too. But wrestling's not easy, where, they embrace everything about it, and, they're wrestlers too. So that's be my response.
All right. Last thing for the day, I always leave a little time for some final thoughts. You're heading off to a tournament. Doesn't have to be that, but what are some final thoughts you'd like to leave everybody with?
And I just appreciate the opportunity. I love what I do, and I think if you're interested in wrestling at all, I think reach out to some programs, because we need more women out there, and especially in our Iowa programs, they're pretty small still. That we need more people in programs, that, wrestling's going to change your life. That, obviously we want you at Wartburg, but yeah, get in the sport of wrestling, and, embrace the change and be a better woman out of it.
Awesome. Very good. Well, I haven't been up to Wartburg, and I hope it's kind of on my list of places to try to get up to. Maybe when the high school season's over and you guys are prepping for nationals there, maybe I can swing up and spend a day and see what goes on in the Wartburg room.
Absolutely. Stop up anytime.
All right.
You see the trophy case.
I want to see the trophy case. So, well, good luck this weekend, and thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.